The fourth test launch of Starship has just occurred, and once again, as usual, it was a great spectacle. The last one, the third experimental flight, had an uncertain outcome. In this case, the objectives were very clear. They wanted to land the main booster on the Earth's surface, but they would simply have it land in the sea, simulating a virtual platform. Starship, on the other hand, was supposed to re-enter the atmosphere undamaged and achieve a soft landing, simulating what would happen on a normal mission. The launch was phenomenal, as one would expect from such a large and powerful vehicle. It was noticed almost immediately that not all 33 Raptor engines at the base of the Super Heavy launcher ignited. It seems one did not ignite. From the images, we can tell they arrived regularly at the so-called staging, that is the moment when the main stage separates from the actual Starship. At that point, Starship continued towards orbit, while the main stage returned to Earth to try to simulate this simulated landing. A perfectly controlled re-entry without the instabilities of flight number 3. Most importantly, the engines were reignited to decelerate until they stopped Starship a few meters above the sea surface, perfectly stable. At that point, they shut off the engines and the test was considered positive, so it collapsed onto the sea surface. As for Starship, the flight went perfectly and everything was within nominal parameters. This was again a so-called suborbital flight, and therefore gradually began to touch the atmosphere near the Indian Ocean. As already seen in flight number 3, the orange-yellow plasma that forms around the ship when it impacts the layers of the atmosphere was very visible. This time the attitude was very stable, so the spacecraft offered the atmosphere the part designed to withstand high temperatures, where there is the heat shield with all these small tiles of a material that can withstand these temperatures, but also protect the hull of the actual spacecraft. It should be noted that SpaceX deliberately launched Starship without a couple of tiles here and there, precisely because they want to see what happens if Starship loses a tile. Would it lead to the destruction of the spacecraft, or would it still manage to survive atmospheric re-entry? This was part of the series of tests that they wanted to do, since the spacecraft was lost anyway because it was going to end up in the Indian Ocean. However, it seems that a large part of the re-entry was withstood perfectly by Starship, and it was really spectacular to see it go through this plasma, and moreover, without ever losing the connection. Here's the good part though. At a certain point, after the announcer declares that the temperatures on the hull were dropping, a kind of plasma infiltration starts happening right by one of these flaps that regulate the attitude of the spacecraft. Slowly this infiltration expands and begins to penetrate the structure of the flap, where you can practically see the steel, the metallic structure that begins to melt and be consumed under the extremely high thermal stresses of the atmospheric plasma. But the Starship continues to send the telemetry signals, so it's alive. So you could see at what speed it was traveling and at what altitude it was. It managed to carry out this famous flip maneuver at the end, where the rocket practically gets ready for the position to land, and it gets ready to brake, to reduce its speed and to maintain the landing attitude. From the little that could be seen in the video, because at that point the camera was very dirty or the lens had broken, and it seems that they did indeed manage to reduce the speed to 0, just a few meters above the water, exactly like it was supposed to do, and it seems that in the end it fell gently on the surface of the ocean. So it would seem that the objectives were absolutely achieved. The show was absolutely there, even too much so, and it kept us on the edge of our seats. However, we're still waiting for SpaceX's definitive statements, but all in all, a nice success.